This is Highgate Cemetry. For a graveyard, it's one of the prettiest spots in London, in a bizarro kind of way. Covered in forest, paths and tiny trails cut here and there through gravestones and tombs masterfully designed. More than a few big names buried under her soil. Note the female angels, a Victorian creation. Before that age, all angels were male.
Many people buried here were killed by a cholera epidemic which swept over Soho, which is a spot that's now popular with tourists. They used to believe that cholera and other diseases were caused by airborne agents. There was a term miasma. It was sort of like a mist or a cloud that hung over London.
The graveyard in places has a wild feel, as if you stumbled upon these ruins in some forbidden land. It would be easy for someone walking at night to let their imagination run away from them. It's not hard to succumb to a "someone could be watching me" sensation.
But there's another story here, hiding like an elephant in the corner of the room.
A story that would result in frowns and expulsion if the staff hears me mention it, which is why I've walked to the edges of the grounds to tell you quietly.
It's the tale of a Romanian nobleman who was brought here in the 1800s, but allegedly he wasn't a man at all. When later a satanic ritual woke him up, bad things started to happen.
The story starts to get traction in the late 60s. It was an era of anti-establishment thinking, hallucinogenic drug experimentation, and great preoccupation with the occult. Roman Polanski's Rosemary's Baby was a hair-raising hit. The Rolling Stones released their Satanic Majesty's Request. The counterculture was stirring up a small moral panic.
An urban legend begins to spread. People report seeing a mysterious tall man inside the cemetery. When he looks at them, the air grows frigid, their muscles freeze, time slows down.
As the stories grow and become exaggerated, two amateur occultists seize the moment. The newspapers bite hard on the juicy, headline-grabbing content.
It came to a boiling point one Friday the 13th in 1970. A mob of vampire hunters swarmed these gates, invading the cemetery, ripped corpses out of their coffins, and drove wooden stakes through their chests. The following morning, a resident of the nearby neighborhood found a 100-year-old decapitated corpse behind the wheel and said famously, "I should have known this would have happened if I left my car unlocked."
Damage from that night can still be seen today. Two men have been associated with the hysteria. Paranormal investigator David Farrant, who led investigations into the graveyard, and self-proclaimed vampire hunter Sean Manchester, who would later announce that he killed the king vampire terrorizing Highgate. The era has since passed, and Highgate is now locked down much tighter. If there were a sensible vampire surviving in London, he'd have left a long time ago. But there is one place I have left to go with this story. I've secured an interview with one of the vampire hunters. Author of several books, David Farrant is considered an absolute villain to the Highgate Cemetery staff for inciting some of the hysteria back in the day. But I want to hear his side of the story. Just a short walk from the cemetery, I find his home.
This ought to be interesting. I've never met a vampire hunter before. First time for everything.
Entering the open door, I slowly ascend the stairs. At the top, Mr. David Farrant. This guy. Well, it certainly looks like I have the right person. David and I sit down to chop it up. So David, you were one of the original guys that noticed something strange going on in Highgate and sort of brought it to public attention.
Yes. I suddenly saw a tall figure standing just inside the top gate of Highgate Cemetry. And it was a genuine psychic presence, entity, apparition. And within a matter of seconds, it vanished.
Discounting that, if there was no vampire but rather some sort of a spirit, where did that spirit come from?
There were a group of practicing Satanists who were using Highgate Cemetery in the late 60s. Yeah, that is definitely true. And I'm not talking about theatrical Satanists, like you read about in the Sunday papers. I'm talking about genuine people that were going inside some of the vaults there and performing satanic rituals.
Did you ever witness one of these rituals in the park? Or you just heard of them?
I actually discovered the remains of one of these satanic rituals inside Highgate Cemetery. They cast a pentagram on the floor of one of the vaults. There weren't any coffins in it. It was empty. It had a marble floor and it was actually open.
Let me ask you one more question though, just an addendum. Do you think you were unfairly villainized?
I never caused any damage in Highgate Cemetery. I had people in there. We actually conducted a seance in there one night to try and communicate with this psychic entity. I was arrested by the police on that occasion in 1970 and actually taken to court and charged with vampire hunting. Can I clarify that? You can't actually be charged with vampire hunting. It's not an offence.
But you could have been one of the only guys on the planet to have a criminal record of vampire hunting.
Yes.
It's quite a claim to fame.
Yeah, it's a pity I wasn't found guilty. I was acquitted.
Yeah.
Full stop.
What a story. I was in jail for 5 years. What did you do? Vampire hunting. A surprisingly pleasant visit with a paranormal investigator. Didn't really learn much about vampires. Spirits, yeah, I don't know. But what an interesting man. Very unique profession and a fascinating story. I'm glad I had the experience.